the pad, and with Zebra holding the pad to the fence, did something to the page and then handed it back. "You take real good care of yourself, Zebra," the man said. He went off toward Franklin Avenue. Zebra looked at the drawing. The man had crossed out Adam, and over it had drawn an animal with a stubby neck and short legs and a striped body. A zebra. Its legs were in full gallop. It seemed as if it would gallop right off the page. A strong breeze rippled across the drawing, causing it to flutter like a flag in Zebra's hand. He looked out at the street. The man was walking slowly in the shadows of the tall oaks. Zebra had the odd sensation that all of the houses on the street had turned toward that man and were watching him as he walked along. How strange that was! The windows and porches and columns and front doors following intently the slow walk of that tall, one-armed man until he turned into Franklin Avenue and was gone. The whistle blew, and Zebra went inside. Seated at his desk, he slipped the drawing carefully into one of his notebooks. From time to time, he glanced at it. Just before the bell signaled the end of the school day, he looked at it again. Now that was strange. He thought he remembered that the zebra had been drawn directly over his name, the head over the A and the tail over the M. Didn't it seem now to have moved a little beyond the A? Probably he was running a fever again. He would run mysterious fevers off and on for about 3 weeks after each operation on his hand. Fevers sometimes did that to him, excited his imagination. He lived 4 blocks from the school. The school bus dropped him off at his corner. In his school bag he carried his books and the notebook with the drawing. His mother offered him a snack, but he said he wasn't hungry. Up in his room he looked again at the drawing and was astonished to discover that the zebra had reached the edge of his name and appeared poised to leap off. It had to be a fever that was causing him to see the zebra that way. And sure enough, when his mother took his temperature, the thermometer registered 102.6 degrees. She gave him his medicine, but it didn't seem to have much effect, because when he awoke at night and watched and switched on his desk light and peered at the drawing, he saw the little zebra galloping across the page, along the contours of his face, over the hills and valleys of his eyes and nose and mouth, and he heard the tiny clicking of its hooves as cloudlets of dust rose in its wake. He knew he was asleep. He knew it was the fever working upon his imagination. But it was so real, the little zebra running. When he awoke in the morning, his fever was gone, and the zebra was quietly in its place over Adam. Later, as he entered the school, he noticed a large sign on the bulletin board in the hallway. The well-known American artist, Mr. John Wilson, will conduct an art class during the summer for students in 7th and 8th grades. For details, speak to Mrs. English. There will be no tuition fee for this class. During the morning between classes, Zebra ran into Mrs. English in the 2nd-floor hallway. "Mrs. English, about the summer art class, is it okay to ask where, Mr. Wilson is from?" "He's from a small town in Virginia. Are you thinking of signing up for his class?" "I can't draw," Zebra said. "Drawing is something you can learn." "Mrs. English, is it okay to ask how did Mr. Wilson, get hurt?" The school corridors were always crowded between classes. Zebra and Mrs. English formed a little island in the bustling student-jammed hallway. "Mr. Wilson was wounded in the war in Vietnam," Mrs. English said. "I would urge you to join his class. You will get to use your imagination." For the next hour, Zebra sat impatiently through Mr. Morgan's geography class, and afterward he went up to the teacher. "Mr. Morgan, could I, ask, where's Vietnam?" Mr. Morgan smoothed down the jacket of his beige summer suit, touched his bow tie, rolled down a wall mat, picked up his pointer, and cleared his throat. "Vietnam is this long, narrow country in Southeast Asia, bordered by China, Laos, and Cambodia. It is a land of valleys in the north, coastal plains in the center, and marshes in the south. There are barren mountains and tropical rainforests. Its chief crops are rice, rubber, fruits, and vegetables. The population numbers close to 70 million people. Between 1962 and 1973, America fought a terrible war there to prevent the South from falling into the hands of the Communist North. We lost the war. Thank you." I'm impressed by your sudden awakened interest in geography, young man, though I must remind you that your class is studying the Mediterranean," said Mr. Morgan. During the afternoon recess, Zebra was watching a heated basketball game when he looked across the yard and saw John Wilson walk by, carrying a laden plastic bag. Some while later, he came back along the street empty-handed. Over supper that evening, Zebra told his parents he was thinking of taking a summer art class offered by the school. His father said, "Well, I think that's a fine idea." "Wait a minute, I'm not so sure," he said. "It'll get him off the streets," his father said. "He'll become a Matisse instead of a lawyer like his dad. Right, Adam?" "Just you be very careful," his mother said to Adam. "Don't do anything that might injure your hand." "How can drawing hurt his left hand, for heaven's sake?" said his father. That night Zebra lay in bed looking at his hand. It was a dread and a mystery to him, his own hand. The fingers were all there, but like dead leaves that never fell. The ring and little fingers were rigid and curled, and the others barely moved. The doctor said it would take time to bring them back to life. So many broken bones, so many torn muscles and tendons, so many injured nerves. The dark shadow had sprung upon him so suddenly. How stupid, stupid, stupid he had been! He couldn't sleep. He went over to the desk and looked at John Wilson's drawing. The galloping little zebra stood very still over Adam. Early the following afternoon, the last day of school, Zebra went to Mrs. English's office and signed up for John Wilson's summer art class. "The class will meet every weekday from 10 in the morning until 1, said Mrs. English, "starting Monday." Zebra noticed the 3 plastic bags in the corner of the office. "Miss English, is it okay to ask what Mr. Wilson did in Vietnam?" "He told me he was a helicopter pilot," Mrs. English said. "Oh, I neglected to mention that you are to bring an unlined notebook and a pencil to the class." "That's all? A notebook and a pencil?" Mrs. English smiled. "And your imagination." When Zebra entered the art class the next Monday morning, he found about 15 students there, including Andrea from his class with Mrs. English. The walls of the room were bare. Everything had been removed for the summer. Zebra noticed 2 plastic bags on the floor beneath the blackboard. He sat down at the desk next to Andrea's. She wore blue jeans and a yellow summer blouse with blue stripes. Her long red hair was tied behind her head with a dark blue ribbon. She gazed at Zebra through her thick glasses, leaned over, and said, "Are you going to make gloomy drawings too?" Just then John Wilson walked in, carrying a plastic bag, which he put down on the floor next to the 2 others. He stood alongside the front desk, wearing a light blue long-sleeved shirt and jeans. The left shirt sleeve had been folded back and pinned to the shirt. The dark blue cap with the words Land Rover sat jauntily on his head. "Good morning to you all," he said with a shy smile. "Mighty glad you're here. We're going to do 2 things this summer. We're going to make paper into faces and garbage into people. I can see by your expressions that you don't know what I'm talking about, right? Well, I'm about to show you." He asked everyone to draw the face of someone sitting nearby. Zebra hesitated, looked around, then made a drawing of Andrea. Andrea carefully drew Zebra. He showed Andrea his drawing. "It's awful," she grimaced. "I look like a mouse." Her drawing of him was good, but was his face really so sad? John Wilson went from desk to desk, peering intently at the drawings. He paused a long moment over Zebra's drawing. Then he spent more than an hour demonstrating with chalk on the blackboard how they should not be thinking eyes or lips or hands while drawing, but should think about lines and curves and shapes, how they should be looking at where everything was situated in relation to the edge of the paper, and how they should not be looking directly at the edges of what they were drawing, but at the space outside the edges. Zebra stared in wonder at how fast John Wilson's hand raced across the blackboard, and at the empty sleeve rising and falling lightly against the shirt. "You're all going to learn how to see in a new way," John Wilson said. They made another drawing of the same face. "Now I look like a horse," Andrea said. "Are you going to add stripes?" "You are one big pain, Andrea," Zebra said. Shortly before noon, John Wilson laid out on his desk the contents of the plastic bags. a clutter of junked broken objects, including the doll and the umbrella. Using strips of cloth, some lengths of string, crumpled newspaper, his pen, and his one hand, he swiftly transformed the battered doll into a red-nosed, umbrella-carrying clown with baggy pants, a tattered coat, a derby hat, and a somber smile. Turning over the battered frying pan, he made it into a pedestal, on which he placed the clown. "That's a sculpture," John Wilson said with a shy smile. "Garbage into people." The class burst into applause. The clown on the frying pan looked as if it might take a bow. "You all will be doing that too before we're done," John Wilson said. "Now I would like you to sign and date your drawings and give them to me." When they returned the next morning, the drawings were on a wall. Gradually, in the days that followed, the walls began to fill with drawings. Sculptures made by the students were looked at with care, discussed by John Wilson and the class, and then placed on shelves along the walls. A miniature bicycle made of wire, a parrot made of an old sofa cushion, a cowboy made of rope and string, a fat lady made of a dented metal pitcher, a zebra made of glued together scraps of cardboard. "I like your zebra," Andrea said. "Thanks," Zebra said. "I like your parrot." One morning, John Wilson asked the class members to make a contour drawing of their right or left hand. Zebra felt himself sweating and trembling as he worked. "That's real nice," John Wilson said, when he saw Andrea's drawing. He gazed at the drawing made by Zebra. "You all were looking at your hand," he said. "You ought to have been looking at the edge of your hand and the space outside." Zebra drew his hand again. Strange and ugly, the two fingers lay rigid and curled, but astonishingly, it looked like a hand this time. One day, a few minutes before the end of class, John Wilson gave everyone an assignment: draw or make something at home, something very special that each person felt deeply about, and bring it to class. Zebra remembered seeing a book called Incredible Cross-Sections on a shelf in the family room at home. He found the book and took it into his room. There was a colored drawing of a rescue helicopter on one of its contents pages. On page 30 and 31, the helicopter was shown in pieces, its complicated insides displayed in detailed drawings. Rotor blades, control rods, electronics equipment, radar scanner, tail rotor, engine lifeline, winch, all its many parts. Zebra sat at his desk, gazing intently at the space outside the edges of the helicopter on the contents page. He made an outline drawing and brought it to class the next morning. John Wilson looked at it. Was there a stiffening of his muscular neck, a sudden tensing of the hand that held the drawing? He looked at the drawing and tacked it on the wall. The next day he gave them all the same home assignment: draw or make something they felt very deeply about. That afternoon, Zebra went rummaging through the trash bin in his kitchen and garbage cans that stood near the back door of his home. He found some sardine cans, a broken egg beater, pieces of cardboard, chipped buttons, bent bobby pins, and other odds and ends. With the help of epoxy glue, he began to make those bits of garbage a kind of helicopter. For support, he used the desktop, the floor, his knees, the elbow of his left arm, at one point even his chin. Struggling with the last piece, a button he wanted to position as a wheel, he realized that without thinking he had been using his left hand, and the two curled fingers had straightened slightly to his knees. His heart beat thunderously. There had been so many hope-filled moments before, all of them ending in bitter disappointment. He would say nothing. Let the therapist or the doctors tell him. The following morning he brought the helicopter to the class. "Ooh, what is that?" Andrea grimaced. "Something to eat you with," Zebra said. "Get human, Zebra. Mr. Wilson will have a laugh